Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to this class, HUI 390, Leadership in Crime Fiction. It's an Italian-American Studies class. My name is Andrea Fedi. I've been at this university since '94. I was born in Italy. As you can hear, I have an accent, and if you don't understand something, just tell me. I won't mind if you interrupt me to ask me to repeat, clarify. When I was in high school, I studied British English because that was the place where my professors got their training. I did my PhD in Canada, then I moved here in '94, so my accent is complicated from its origin, somewhat. Not as plain and clear as the traditional American accent. This is a class that I was not asked to teach by the department. I was not forced to teach this class. It's a class I created. It's the evolution of two previous classes that I've taught during my years at Stony Brook, the result of one of my interests and research areas. So today, we're going to do four things. I will summarize the idea of the class in just a few words. I will allow some time to get to know each other so that we can introduce every student to the class. Then I've prepared a simple group discussion about Machiavelli, which will be one of the elements in the class, and Machiavellianism, and the popular ideas, or even the keywords, the phrases associated with this political thinker from Renaissance Florence. And then I will introduce the class wiki, and we can talk, of course, about trivial things such as the syllabus, the grades, etc. As you can see, we're not using Brightspace. I posted an announcement on Brightspace. I sent an email to the students who were registered as of last night, this morning, with the link, but just in case, I have a shortcut to get to the class, easy to memorize. If you're familiar with tinyurl.com, you add / and then the code for the class, HUI 390, and you are redirected to this wiki, which is housed in Notion, as you can see from the icon to the top. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Very successful app, knowledge management app used by professionals and some teachers. More practical for me compared to Brightspace, because I can just, once I log in, I can just click and modify or add content to a page without having to go through dialog boxes. And for you, there is no login. The class is public, only it was freshly created during the past few days, so I tried to Google it last night, didn't give me a hit. It'll be indexed eventually, but you have the shortcut, okay? Everything is there. I'll guide you through the main sections of the wiki, and we'll, of course, use it and demo it extensively during the first few classes. So, what is the class about? The core material of the class is the Godfather. Right now, let me show you. Put on the screen the cover, the brilliant cover of the 1969 novel by Mario Puzo. Brilliant because it's all black and you have the puppeteer hand with the string, right? Hinting already that this is not exactly a crime novel of the traditional sort, but rather it's about manipulation and control, the strings, okay? So the core material is the Godfather novel and 3 additional novels written by Mario Puzo. One, which was written right before the Godfather, The Fortunate Pilgrim, which is kind of a revisitation of Mario Puzo's memories as a child. The characters are modeled after his mother, his brother and sister. But then something interesting happened, as you will find in here. Let me show you briefly. when he, of course, the novel never, The Fortunate Pilgrim didn't make Puzo much money. By the time he published The Godfather, he was broke practically, contemplating other jobs, other careers. However, because The Godfather was so famous, and after the movies themselves, he ended up selling 2 million copies of The Fortunate Pilgrim by the 1990s. When he republished it in 1998, he added this preface, which tells you something incredible. It says, "When I hear the voice in my mind of the Godfather, I think of my mother." That's my mother's voice. But he says, this is my own realization. I didn't realize when I wrote The Godfather how much of my mother I put into that character, which explodes our perception of the novel, and then, of course, the movies, and the novel and the movies became models for 30 years of films and novels about the mafia into the 1990s, but it gives you a sense of the novelty of the new formula for the novel, and even more true this is for the films, because as you will see, the novel itself is not high literature. It's kind of trashy. Even Francis Ford Coppola admitted to that. He said at one point in an article, when I read the novel, I said, oh my God, how trashy can this be? Full of sex, full of extrinsic elements, extraneous elements. And he said, I don't want to make a film unless they force me to. But then he saw something in that in that novel. He understood that there was a different way, a different voice for the characters of a mafia film that spoke to a deeper representation or fictional reality of those characters. So what is the formula that made The Godfather successful? Two things. One, you have criminals, the protagonists, the Corleones, especially the chiefs, the heads of the family, Vito and Michael, who are not violent individuals by nature. And even though they are responsible for a lot of violence and suffering, they are rarely directly involved with the execution of the violence. On the screen, in their cinematic existences, they spend most of the time thinking, planning, socializing, and then socialization expands from the criminal organization into the family. And obviously, even crime movies from the 1930s or 40s, 50s, before The Godfather, might have shown the family side of the criminals. But there was a different relationship. There was usually a contrast, right? Something dramatic and something moralistic. What a pity, what a tragedy that the family of the criminal has to suffer the consequences of the criminal activities of this person who cannot control themselves, bring themselves to live the life of an upstanding citizen. In the case of The Godfather, the family and the mafia family, the private family and the mafia family, are connected in the mind of the mafia don, of the mafia boss. Because a lot of what Vito and Michael do is to protect the family, allegedly. Although it is also true that the family's existence and lifestyle are jeopardized by their criminal activities, by their participation in criminal activities of a high level and scale. So the first thing is you see mafia criminals planning crimes more often than executing crimes, which clearly speaks to their leadership in a different way. Their leadership becomes a thing of the mind, not a thing that has to do with a core that would be more animalistic, more natural, as you find in previous depictions of criminals, where the criminals will see, for example, we'll see that in Little Caesar, 1931. Little Caesar is a beast. The way he moves his body, the way he's contorted, his face, his grimace, everything tells you that this is a violent animal, somebody created by nature for that kind of career. Vito and Michael are different. In The Godfather Part 2, you see how Vito became a criminal because of several circumstances in his life. Michael was destined to be a model American citizen at the beginning of The Godfather, right? Where you find him at the marriage, as we will see if you haven't seen the film, wearing a uniform, and we know from the novel and a little bit from the film that his father had thought that he could enter American society with full dignity without having to be subjected to the precarious circumstances of that we see in Vito's life. Ludovica?
If I'm not misremembering, like with the ideology of Machiavelli was that like it's not the fault of the individual, but it's the context of the nature in which you're putting it.
No. It's quite different. Well, it's a small difference, but it's crucial. That is to say, as we will see, because during the course of the first few weeks we'll do a selective reading of passages from the Prince and discuss a matrix of Machiavellian ideology. But Machiavelli is not saying that you should be able in a savage way to exercise violence. Rather, he's saying whether or not you are violent by nature as a leader, whether or not you want to resort to the use of violence, deceit, betrayal, you might find yourself playing a game, and we'll talk about this concept that is my own concept of Machiavellian game. You'll find yourself in a context where that's the nature of the game, where if you don't use force, deceit, betrayal, the other players who are competing with you for the outcomes in that context might use those tools to their advantage. And in fact, you can push it even farther and speculate, because the Prince is such a short and somewhat chaotic, confusing book, which is surprising because everyone mentions it as a model, but it's a very difficult model to interpret and apply. But you can push it farther and say that possibly Machiavelli could think that the leader will be forced to damn his soul for eternity. In a way, the leader, pushed by the circumstances, will have to play a game that will compromise his human core. But he'll have to do that for the sake of preserving his own power, which, in a broader Machiavellian view, benefits society. According to Machiavelli's outdated, obsolete view of society, where in a Renaissance view of humanity, there are the few talented individuals who will be political leaders, artists, successful merchants, etc. And then 90% of the population is just sheep. It's just people who live mostly by natural instincts, desires, and therefore they need someone forceful enough to keep them in check, to keep their desires in check, to keep their instincts in check, to make them better citizens by enforcing boundaries. not that this is the only model of society, political society in Machiavelli, because Machiavelli wrote extensively about the Roman Republic in very in a very complementary way, with very positive, in very positive terms. But Machiavelli believed that politics is made of cycles, and in order to have a successful democracy, you need mature citizens who can become political players. But part of the cycle is that democracy devolves into a state of anarchy that prompts the need for a stronger leader to restore order, which is the basis for the operation of a modern economy, right? Without safety, security inside the borders, protection from outside enemies, the economy cannot function. In turn, without a functioning economy, the government cannot be powerful enough to sustain itself, etc. So that's the idea, that Michael could have become a model citizen following a different career path compared to his brother Sonny. However, because at the time when he was back from the army, his father Vito was the victim of an assassination attempt, Michael finds himself, first he has to go to the hospital to pretend to be one of the armed guards protecting his father from a second assassination attempt. Then he has to go and kill another mafia member and a police officer, right? And then he has to go to Sicily. But you have this idea that it's not his choice. However, once you acknowledge, once you recognize what the circumstances are, and you have not an idealistic reading of the situation. This is the situation. What should I do to be a good son to my father? But rather, you look pragmatically in a Machiavellian way at the end goal. What do I need to do right now, in this place, the hospital, to protect my father? Then your choices, in a Machiavellian fashion, might be limited to: I have to pretend to be aggressive, I have to show that I can be violent, or I have to kill a cop and I have to be the one doing that because they will not expect that from me because I don't have a criminal record. Okay, so it seems like a logical choice in Machiavellian terms. So, as I said, no criminals on the screen, on the page, because they're planners, thinkers, therefore leaders, and they present many of the elements of the qualities that we find in the description of the ideal Machiavellian leader of the prince. And then, of course, in order to understand that, as I suggested earlier, we'll have to look at crime films from the past, especially crime films involving the mafia or Italian Americans, but not exclusively that. So we'll go back to Little Caesar, which is very famous, but even Scarface from the same period. The original one had Italian American characters. We'll look at films from the post-war era, such as The Hitchhiker, for example. And in all of these films, as I said, the criminal is this animalistic brute who cannot avoid using violence. Violence is their primary option. So it's not necessary use of violence, calculated, intentional use of violence. They're violent because this is what they are. They do what they are. And in other instances, we'll see how the criminal is a social deviant, right? That cannot be brought back to society, but is only as powerful as the situation will allow. In The Hitchhiker, a hitchhiker threatens for the entirety of the film two former American soldiers who want nothing else than spend a weekend fishing in peace and under the threat, with this handgun pointed at them from the hitchhiker sitting in the back of the car. They'll have to obey everything that the criminal will say. But as soon as the police at the end of the film gets the handgun out of the criminal's hands, he starts crying and complaining and screaming like a baby, right? Because it's not as strong as the average good citizen, model citizen. There will be a week devoted to a couple of examples. For some of the movies, we'll just watch a few scenes and comment on them. There will be a week devoted to the introduction of a new category for criminals right before The Godfather came out, in the 10 years leading to that, which will also become very fruitful in terms of movies, which is the professional. This idea that you have a gang of people who don't know each other. Each is an expert, a top expert in something, top expert in explosives, top expert in opening safes or alarm systems. In modern versions of this, it could be a top hacker, right? They come together, they're very focused, they're very committed, they have this big heist in mind. However, they're not really criminal, because while they're planning and executing the plans for this big heist, what is that they talk about? What will you do with a share of your money? And they're not planning to go back to a life of crime. They'll finally settle. They'll finally go back into society. They'll go to paradise in the Pacific Ocean, or they'll open a restaurant or buy a villa, start a family, right? So the crime there is an exception, and you can empathize with them because you admire their professional skills and their dedication, even though they're criminal. And so we'll consider a couple of options for this category. One is the original version of Ocean 11 with the Rat Pack, with Sammy Davis Jr., with Frank Sinatra, and the other, the Thomas Crown Affair with Steve McQueen, who was the Brad Pitt of the era, or the Clooney of the era, both put together the cool guy par excellence in Hollywood, cool to a fault, where he plays more or less the same kind of silent, cool guy, silent, strong guy, all about understatement because he doesn't need to show off how good he is. And then we'll watch The Godfather, the trilogy, and we'll also watch, of course, A Bronx Tale, Goodfellas, and we'll finish with Donnie Brasco. But on Tuesdays, we'll read some pages, sections, episodes from books about the mafia, fiction and non-fiction. On Thursdays, we'll watch scenes from a movie and discuss how they correspond to and how we can assess their Machiavellian nature. Okay, so this was supposed to be a short introduction. Shortcut that you see on the board, tinyurl.com/HUI390. That's where you land. This is the portal of the wiki. And what you find in here is, after the table of content, a few paragraphs explaining how I came with the idea of the class. And infused in this narrative are some of the key concepts for the class. It's not difficult reading, but it'll be one of the readings for this week. You find the basic information about me and an official picture taken a few months ago, which serves me well because based on the dark suit can be seen as Machiavellian, right? I don't play the part of the mobster well, but the next page, so every page, as you can see, at the bottom of every page there is a section called Go To, with basic navigation to all the main sections of the website and a link to bring you back to the top of the page without scrolling. The wiki will resize on your phone, will be readable on your phone or tablet, not just your computer, so it's very practical. Once you save the link as an icon, you can access it quite expediently. So the main page, the meat and potatoes or the main entree for the class is this page, because not only you find the list of topics and films, but as we go along, I'll post pages for each week. So for example, find the page for week 1, and in here you find another of the readings, just in a more organized, comprehensive format. You find some of the ideas of my introduction in the form of short Q&As. Okay, so something you can read at home when you have time. The rest of it is part of our lesson plan, the icebreaker that we did, the group discussion on Machiavelli, and of course we'll have a group discussion about the mafia and the stereotypes surrounding the mafia lore on Thursday. On Thursday, I will start introducing elements of Machiavellianism, guiding us to a better understanding of what Machiavelli is about. And I'll start with some examples that made me think at the beginning about a class such as this one. Here, once again, you find the shortcut to the class and the various sections. And of course, assignments are quite easy and light for this week. By Thursday, your assignments are to explore the class wiki, to read the syllabus, to read a couple of texts that are probably about a page each. The inspiration for the class, the Q&A, right? And we move on to the next and more important section of the syllabus. Here you have on top, it's hardly recognizable, but it's a scene, if you remember The Godfather, and otherwise it's it, where they're about to go to war after Vito has been hit the first time, and they're cooking Italian food and enjoying a familial atmosphere among gang members and together with the two of the brothers in the family. So family and criminal activities are joined in a different ways. So I'm not going to go through everything in the syllabus. Of course, you find things such as another description of the topic, because I have to include it for the official documents, but once you read the other sections, this will be redundant for you. Learning objectives, which you can have a look at. Of course, you find my office hours. I offer office hours in person Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 9:30, in the Center for Italian Studies, and on Zoom on Friday afternoons, but even on Tuesday and Thursday you can Zoom with me during the in-person office hours. I use an app called Calendly, so if you have this link, which you will find in the calendar, then this is what you see in your browser, right? It tells you that you're booking 15 minutes meeting with me. It gives you, of course, there are no more hours today, but the next option would be Thursday, and if you click on Thursday, we'll give you the options that exist right now, 9:30, 9:45, I want to book 9:45, and I click next. I just have to provide name, email, and perhaps just a quick description of what the meeting is about. And when you click schedule event, you get an email. And from that email that confirms your appointment, you can also reschedule or cancel if needed. Okay. So, what else? Okay, let's talk about the grades. 20% is for participation, group activities or discussions we do in class. After I show a scene, you can comment on that. But we're doing this in class to make our mind works, not to test your knowledge of the readings, etc., but rather to develop your ability to analyze content, and then this can help you complete your assignments more easily and successfully. There are 4 assignments, and these are the themes. As you can see, they're very general themes. They're all connected to Machiavelli's ideology, and of course, I'll add more during the semester, but there are 4 assignments you have to complete during the semester. You decide when to do them. I just put one fixed deadline. By the end of the 5th week, you have to complete at least one, because otherwise everyone would wait until the very end. But the idea is the following. As we read things, as we watch movies in class, and some of those you may watch yourself at home, when you feel that you have enough of an understanding and enough material to work on the themes of violence and deterrence. Deterrence would be using the threat of violence, right? In order to resolve a situation. Like in Godfather lingo, an offer you cannot refuse, right? Because you know that if you refuse there will be consequences, yet you're not victimized, you're not the direct target of violence yet at the time the offer is made to you. When you feel that you have enough examples and enough of an understanding of these themes in reference to 1 or 2 films or books, you complete your assignment. The assignments, I'll explain on Thursday, will be done on a Google Docs file. I'll create those files and share them with you by the end of the week. And you complete your assignment and you put a comment. You know, Google Docs has comments you can add to the title of the assignment, let's say, and you put, I'm done with this assignment, you can review it and read it, okay? And they don't have to be done in order. That is to say, if you have enough material and ideas to do assignment number 2 as your first assignment at some point, you go ahead and do that. As long as you complete those by the end of the semester, the assignment should be a couple of pages. But it should be specific examples connected to themes of the class. And again, we'll go back and discuss them, provide examples as we go. And you find, here of course, you find instructions, etc. So you can refer to the syllabus. The written reflections are 30%. Okay? And there is a presentation that we'll do at the end of the semester, the final week. In class, you'll have about 10 minutes, maybe a little less, to present some of the findings for your project. Okay? And you find some details there as well. And I'll provide assistance as needed. That is to say, you can come to me, it's a small class, relatively small class, so if you need help with the presentation, with the project, we can work one-to-one. And the final paper, basically, we'll discuss it further as we go, but the final project will be, I'll distribute the attendance in the meantime. If your name is not there because you just added, just add your name and sign. But the idea for the paper is you find either a book or a film that is aligned with the contents of the class, that is not one of the films we've seen in class, we've discussed in class, and you replicate the kind of analysis we do. You apply the same matrix to assess how Machiavellian that film is, or how aligned, or how different is from typical representations of criminal. That's the idea. Okay, of course, the rest of the syllabus is the standard matrix, questions before we leave this room, although make sure you sign, because you know that I have to compile the beginning of semester attendance, which has legal repercussions. I apologize, I circulate this sooner on other times, and you can remind me to circulate the attendance. There is another page two other pages. Let me show you briefly, but you'll see them and make sense of them. So you also find the table of content in here. Allows you to move quickly. Go here, you have news and announcements. So in here, other than things that pertain to class, I might advertise events on campus that are of interest to us. There will be one on February 12th, a panel of Richard Gambino, Italian-American scholars, and we'll read a couple of articles from him. He criticized the relevance given to films about the mafia. He thought that that increased discrimination. Of course, we'll discuss this, right? We'll have to. And the other section is the calendar, where it's a week one. You can find, for example, the link for Zoom appointments, and you can find the office hours, the locations, etc., and deadlines, things of that nature. Any questions so far?